And then there will be 10 to 15 minutes for questions from the judges staying in roll. Everybody needs to stay in roll for that period of time. And then after that, when all questions are done, we can fall out of roll and be ourselves. And so just, do you need any forms to fill out?
Oh, yes, please.
Okay. Are you here for all four?
All four?
Four. Are you a judge?
Yes.
Okay, so are you here for all
Yes.
these four? Okay. There you go. Okay, and sorry.
It's okay.
For a minute.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, would you like to introduce yourself to the students and maybe do your name tag?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So maybe.
Yeah, so my name is Jackie King, and I'm a communications manager at Nokia for the Asia Pacific region, and I've been there for the past 5 years.
Okay, so we're not supposed to say where we're associated with, but it's okay.
Okay.
But, okay, so you guys, what role are we playing? And what roles do you play?
So that's actually part of our presentation. If we want to.
Do you want to pull up?
Oh, okay.
Yes.
How about just telling us what roles you
Okay.
want us to play?
Yes. Oh, so you guys are going to be the board of directors of
Directors.
Coca-Cola and board of directors of FEMSA.
Okay.
And we'll go more into what FEMSA is. And I'm Sonia Descalker, and I'm the legal specialist.
I'm Anastasia Ariano, and I'm the corporate responsibilities consultant.
I'm Uday Singh. I'm the research analyst.
I'm Sophie Hollowell. I'm the project lead and financial analyst for this team.
Okay, and then when each of you give your presentations, if you don't mind reintroducing yourselves, because we're trying to take notes and the names are new to us. So
Of course.
I'll speak for myself, they're new to me. Okay, we are now going into roll, and we will start with your 25 minutes. It's 8:02, so 8:27.
So thank you guys so much for joining us again. We are Horizon Consulting, and like I said, my name is Sonia Descalker. I am the legal specialist.
My name is Sophie Hollowell. I'm again the project lead and financial analyst.
I'm Uday Singh. I'm the research analyst.
I'm Anastasia Ariano, the corporate social responsibility consultant.
And we are basically going to be talking about the sustainable consumption of Coca-Cola products in Mexico, and you guys are going to be the Coca-Cola board of directors and Coca-Cola FEMSA.
So to begin the presentation, we just wanted to go over what's going to be on our agenda. First, we'll do case overview, problem breakdown, the solution, and then just a little touch on implementation. Beginning with the case overview, we first wanted to just provide you with a little bit about the business. So you see on the left the mission and core values of Coca-Cola Global. We really just wanted to highlight that as a whole and as a company, Coca-Cola exists to excel for the benefit of their associates, consumers, customers, communities, and owners. So it's not just about driving forward one bottom line, it's about impacting a bunch of different stakeholders. And then you see on the next two columns, it's specific to Coca-Cola FEMSA. We just wanted to give you an idea of what their product mix and operational information looks like. But the biggest takeaway is that they're the world's largest beverage bottler and marketer of the Coca-Cola system by sales volume, so they have a really big impact on the company. And then on the right are their 6 strategic priorities for the next year. And today we'll be focusing on growing the core, building a sustainable future, and creating a consumer-centric strategy. And for context and objectives, we also wanted to provide current social initiatives that are being implemented by Coke. They focus specifically on 2 categories in sustainability and social, but we also wanted to highlight that within those, looking at current consumer trends, there's a rise of Gen Z and millennials that's bringing with them a new era of conscious consumerism, as well as post-pandemic effects that have really shifted consumer market to health focuses. So we see 78% of consumers value sustainability, and 84% actually condemn poor environmental practices. So it's really more crucial than ever for Coca-Cola to move away from corporate neutrality and into active corporate responsibility. With that, the objectives for breaking down the problem and then providing a solution today really focuses on the social aspect of communicating Coca-Cola's humanity. That involves 2 steps: creating a social connection. Because today's consumer is so socially conscious and very aware, it's really important for Coca-Cola to determine how to meet those expectations moving forward to generate long-term growth. Part of that involves improving trust and brand perception. Trusted companies are expected to outperform their peers by up to 400% in terms of total market value. So we really wanted to hone in on monopolizing on that for this company. Moving into the problem breakdown, first just wanted to give a general overview. Today we're going to be focusing on the overconsumption of Coca-Cola in Mexico. So this is generally just showing the correlation between sugar-sweetened beverages and the obesity epidemic within that region. You see a really notable association with obesity and weight gain with consumption of SSBs. So it is within Coca-Cola's interest to determine what this relationship looks like and make sure that it's not going to come back and harm their brand. Okay, so the problem in Mexico specifically, if you take a look at those 2 graphs on the left, we see between 1990 to 2015 a pretty large mean intake of SSB per day, and it hasn't really seen any improvement. In fact, in emerging economies, we're seeing an increase of mean intake. Part of the problem within Mexico is Coca-Cola is actually cheaper than water. Because of Mexico's joinment of NAFTA in 1994, those tariffs were eliminated, and it made Coke really cheap throughout the entire country. In Chiapas, San Cristobal de las Casas specifically, residents consume 2.2 liters of Coke per day at around 800 liters per capita per year. If you look at that compared to the United States, it's only around 124 liters. We also see that diabetes take around 3,000 lives in the state per year. That graph supports that by showing that the leading causes of death in Mexico are heart disease and diabetes. So again, we see that this is a huge problem within the community that's related pretty specifically to Coca-Cola's product. And so we wanted to be able to figure out a way that we could minimize that negative impact. A few of those quotes are really just highlighting the cultural impact that Coca-Cola has in these neighborhoods that tend to be, again, a little bit underprivileged and more poverty-stricken. A lot of these communities don't have the education or the infrastructure to understand the health implications behind consuming Coke in an irresponsible manner. So Coca-Cola's role in the problem. We see Coca-Cola FEMSA has a facility that's very closely located to San Cristobal, and that bottling facility extracts more than 300,000 gallons of water a day for Coca-Cola production. It also has a huge impact on the economy. A lot of these people depend on Coke for their livelihood, so there's very little room to fight back against overconsumption and widespread proliferation of the Coca-Cola product throughout these towns. It's often more accessible than drinking water, and again cheaper, so these people depend on it for the majority of their liquid consumption. We can also look at a few of the marketing tactics that Coca-Cola has used between the 1990s to now within this area. It's slightly convoluted with a huge focus on really relating to indigenous culture and religious references. And so really increasing the proliferation of sales without like any sort of educational resource behind what the impact will be in the long run. Okay, I'm going to pass it off to Sanvi to discuss the legal issues of the problem.
Okay, yeah, so moving on to the legal issues in Mexico, specifically San Cristobal on sugary sweetened beverages and how they're constantly battling the overconsumption of SSBs and are facing diabetes as well as obesity rates. So first I'm going to be starting with 3 main laws: the labeling law, the IBES law, and the NOM 051 law. The labeling law pertains to products with excess sugar should have warning labels. And while this is helpful, there hasn't really been a direct correlation to the reducing of consumption of SSB products. So next, the IBES law is basically called the sugar tax, in which sugary sweetened beverages are taxed by 1 peso, and this is intended to change buying habits, but again, hasn't really changed people from buying Coca-Cola products. And the last one is the NOM 051 law, which it is intended for children and the limited advertisement of sugary sweetened beverages. So comparing Mexican laws to American laws are much more aggressive in tackling down the reduction of consumption of SSBs, just because there has been documented and seen pushback of SSBs. And lastly, Mexico just needs to have new and improved policies that actually show pushback of SSB consumption. So next I'm going to pass it on to Anastasia, who's going to be talking about the ethical issues.
Yeah, so Salmi's mentioned, I'll be talking about the ethical issues that we see here due to the cultural impact of Coca-Cola and San Cristobal. So I broke this down in kind of like a domino effect. So first we start off with work absenteeism, which is due to chronic conditions, fatigue, and frequent illnesses. And this kind of connects to and works with lower work productivity as well. So due to obesity-related health issues due to overconsumption, this causes reduced energy levels and decreased cognitive function. Now, as a result of work absenteeism and lower work productivity, we see a major financial strain on this area. This aggregates existing poverty, the residents of San Cristobal are unable to rise out of poverty, and this just becomes an overall economic burden that is mentally and physically draining. Along with that, due to the mentally and physically draining reason, due to financial strain and not being able to go to work due to health conditions, this causes obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and hypertension as well. And this further hinders one's ability to thrive. And unfortunately, this leads to the fatal end of our domino effect, which is due to obesity-related health conditions and complications, and due to lack of clean water and overconsumption, which significantly shortens life expectancy. Now I'll pass it back over to Sophie to discuss financial issues.
So first we just wanted to highlight again the negative impact that actually comes back to Coca-Cola from not considering the ethical issues of obesity, the obesity epidemic within San Cristobal and their very close relationship to the FEMSA bottling facility. We're first going to take a look at reputation repair costs. Actually, the Global Energy Balance Network scandal was around 2015, and essentially there were a bunch of articles that came out about Coca-Cola funding faulty research that was backing that obesity was related more to physical activity than intake of sugar or diet. Those two charts under sales and consumer sentiment and essentially show a drop in unit case volumes and in stock price. So there's a pretty direct impact on their company in terms of what their revenue looks like. And then on top of that, the Lamar versus Coca-Cola lawsuit resulted in additional costs that Coca-Cola had to cover to address that issue. If we take a look at metrics looking into the future, the sales and revenue risk, I'm sorry, I know it's a little hard to see, but it shows that volume is actually decreasing by around 3% in North America. And if we look at brand value trends, Coca-Cola has actually been pretty consistently decreasing for the past 10 years. And relating that pretty specifically to this rise in health consciousness and these consumer trends that we talked about at the beginning of this presentation. Because Coca-Cola is so heavily dependent on SSBs, we're beginning to see that reflected in their actual revenue. $68 trillion of wealth is expected to pass to the younger generation, which is a huge market share, and we're already seeing decreases in heavy consumption of SSBs, which again makes up a pretty large majority of their current product mix, and it's a legitimate concern that they need to consider from a financial perspective. Okay, moving on into the solution, I'd like to pass it off to Uday.
Alright, so as you must have realized by now, this is a highly complex and regional issue that cannot really be tackled by Coca-Cola or Coca-Cola FEMSA's overall sustainability strategies. So what we're suggesting here is a three-pronged longitudinal solution that takes over different parts of the issue that we've talked about so far. The first thing that we're suggesting is a marketing push for alternative products developed by Coca-Cola, followed by an increase of local supply of CL bottled water, which is the dominant bottled water brand from Coca-Cola in Mexico, and finally followed by a reduction of local groundwater usage in the Chiapas region of Mexico. I'll be going over 3 steps in more detail. So first, about the alternative products, we can see that 246 low or no sugar products were launched by Coca-Cola globally in 2022, and they've already found a pretty significant market in countries like the US or Canada, but the market has not reached the same potential in Mexico. But we feel that this is surely an untapped market because market analysis clearly show that not only are Mexicans more interested in finding alternative and healthier products coming from trusted brands, they're also willing to pay, more willing to pay an additional amount of money in investing in those products than a lot of other underdeveloped countries. And secondly, we believe that any push for these products won't really be creating a new market, as these happen to be very adjacent to drinks that are already popular in the country. And Coca-Cola in general is one of the most trusted brands in the country and locally in Chiapas as well. So we feel like any marketing push that incorporates a Coca-Cola branding heavily is likely to find success. And finally, as Sophie mentioned earlier, there is a huge young population in the country of Mexico that is about to inherit a big market share of Coca-Cola in the future. And various analyses over decades have shown that younger consumers are more likely to invest in healthier products, which is why we feel like a marketing push in this area is likely to find success. Moving on to the other dimension of the issue, which is the lack of availability of water in the Chiapas region of Mexico, we feel that an increase in localized supply of CL bottled water is a good solution in providing people equitable access to water while also maintaining Coca-Cola's profitability. We feel that, as you can see on the chart on the left, Mexico is not only the biggest consumer of bottled water in the world, but also CL, which is the brand that Coca-Cola has for bottled water, has been the market leader for decades now. So if we're trying to provide a market for bottled water, Coca-Cola already has a head start essentially because it's a trusted brand and people are drinking CL anyway. So what we're only suggesting is an increase in supply in the Chiapas region to undercut the price of Coca-Cola. So when someone is going to the grocery store in the region or a gas station or a little store and they see a refrigerator, they're not forced to buy Coca-Cola because it happens to be cheaper. They have the option to buy water. And lastly, we also feel that over the course of the next 6 to 7 years, we can also tap into other segments of this market and look at products such as no sugar water, sparkling water, or flavored water, which have already found success in countries like the US, to first establish a market for these alternative water-based products and also hone in on the product value. Finally, the last dimension of a problem is groundwater usage in the area. As Sophie mentioned earlier, the FEMSA bottling facility in Chiapas has been accused of drawing over 200,000 gallons of water per day, which often leads people to not having access to drinking water in their own homes. And this is a major issue for Coca-Cola because right now Coca-Cola's overall sustainability strategy focuses on reducing the water footprint from a global supply chain perspective. And they found that 73% of the footprint actually comes from agriculture. However, when you look at Chiapas, you'll find that most of this water footprint is not really coming from agriculture, it's coming from groundwater usage. So we feel that Coca-Cola's global sustainability strategy needs to be tweaked a lot and adapted to cater to groundwater usage. We see two basic solutions. Lowering water usage per bottle of Coke produced, which Coca-Cola is already doing. They've had a lot of success in doing so by reducing water use by 17.4% only in the last few years. But we feel that other water replenishment measures to create a circular usage of water by the bottling facility must be audited to make sure that water that is used from the Chiapas groundwater table is actually replenished to Chiapas and not elsewhere in Mexico. And finally, we also want to mention that in the past, Coca-Cola has invested in health education programs and fitness programs to neutralize the adverse health effects they've had, but study after study has shown that these have not done anything to actually improve people's health. So we're suggesting that we draw away funds from these unsuccessful health programs that Coca-Cola has invested in and actually invest these funds into developing better water infrastructure for the people of Chiapas. So as we reduce the groundwater usage by 2030, people also have the access and the means to actually gain this access to the groundwater that we're giving back. And now I'll pass it back to Sanvi, who will go over the legal implications of our solution.
Yeah, so now pivoting on from the three-pronged solution, we're going to go to the legal implications on the reduction of consumption of SSBs. So first, let's talk reformulation. Taking a stance on the non-051, it's time for big companies like Coca-Cola to rethink what they put into their famous drink. Also, this reduces the need for warning labels. So next up, honesty is the best policy. So by providing clear health campaigns and labels, this will inform customers the risks of what they're actually consuming. Also, let's think broader, specifically something healthier and more wallet-friendly, something that dodges the sugar tax and chooses better. Lastly, no one wants a legal battle, so by providing honest and clear labels and campaigns, this reduces the risk of litigation and honestly just corporate drama. Overall, changing the game in which Coca-Cola plays in will be crucial to reducing the consumption of SSBs legally and ethically. So now I'm going to be passing it on to Anastasia, who's going to be talking about the the ethical implications.
Thank you, Salvi. So there are four implications I decided to focus on today. Firstly, public health, secondly, water usage and access, then marketing to vulnerable populations, and then the environmental impact of it. So firstly, we'll start off with public health. So as we've been talking about, there are dangerously high rates of obesity and diabetes in this area. As Uday has mentioned, one of our solutions would be to provide healthy alternatives, specifically to increase the supply of CL water bottles. And then, additionally, I suggest that we contribute to public health initiatives that aim at reducing soda consumption and aim at providing healthier diets. Secondly, water usage and access. Due to Coca-Cola's industry and how they operate, there is a strain on local water resources. So there is a concern of water scarcity and equitable access to clean water. So as we did also mention, one of our solutions would be to reduce groundwater usage. Along with that, I also suggest that we prioritize local community water needs and invest in ways to do that. Marketing to vulnerable populations. Coca-Cola aggressively markets to children and adolescents. But I suggest we use those aggressive marketing tactics and shift them towards CL water bottles and other alternatives. And along with that, be more transparent in advertising practices. Lastly, the environmental impact. In general, there's pollution, resource depletion, and limited access to clean water. I believe the industry needs to take accountability and invest in ways in resolving this. So the increase in CL water bottle products will help mitigate these issues. And I'll go into a little bit further detail with the stuff I just mentioned through the SDG goals. All 17 SDG goals could really help this issue with San Cristobal, but I decided to focus on SDG 9 and SDG 12. SDG 9 involves industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Industry, in general, we believe that they should invest in infrastructure improvement to support the recommended solutions we've mentioned, along with water-saving technology. We also believe the industry should engage with the local community to know what their wants and needs are in order to gain access to clean water. In terms of infrastructure, they should implement groundwater conservation initiatives and increase access to clean water. In terms of innovation, I left this a little bit more general, but they should have innovation within supply chains to support these goals. For SDG 12, there's responsible consumption and production. So with the implementation of marketing campaigns that promote sustainable consumption patterns and encourages consumers to make healthier choices, there are environmental benefits of this, which is the lower of environmental footprint. I also suggest they should increase the use of recycled materials and CL packaging to promote positive economic patterns. Lastly, they should encourage raising awareness on the impact of beverages choices on health and how it affects our environment. Now I would like to pass it back to Sophie to discuss the financial implications.
Okay, so we're just going to take a really quick look at cost of sweetener, which makes up a pretty large percent of cost of goods sold within Coca-Cola production specifically. We see that cost of sweetener is actually pretty expensive per ton. These are just the various sweeteners that Coca-Cola uses within this project. So we're seeing a rising cost of goods sold. So by kind of shifting to different products and diversifying product mix as well as increasing CL water supply, we're actually minimizing these costs, which is coming back into Coca-Cola's revenue or allowing them to alternate that funding somewhere else. We just did a really small CVP analysis. All of these numbers are taken from the 2023 financial statements are in millions of dollars if you take note. So total revenue was around 14,000 million, total units sold was around 4,000 million unit cases, cost of goods sold was around 8,000 million, and operative expenses were around 4,500 million. From there we can calculate the selling price per unit by dividing revenue over total units sold. And we're generally just going to assume that cost of goods sold makes up total variable cost and operative expense makes up total fixed cost. And having all of that information, we essentially get to a break-even point of around 9,900 million in sales revenue. And again, we're not suggesting that Coca-Cola completely change their product mix. We're just suggesting that we increase CL water. And just by minimizing the cost of sweetener, we see that they can get up to around 1,141 in savings. So that's already making up a decent amount of that break-even point. Cost of sweetener was just calculated by the amount of sweetener in a Coca-Cola product and then finding a percentage of that, and then that went into contribution per unit. But we're already seeing potential for savings by just limiting cost of sweetener by diversifying product mix. Go to the left side. Let's talk a little bit more about what sales potential with water is in Mexico. If we look at this study, bottled water is actually expected to grow pretty significantly in Mexico at a 4.1% compound annual growth rate. And by 2028, sales volume in Mexico is expected to be around 6,800 million. Breaking that down, we see carbonated bottled water and still bottled water making up the majority of that sales volume, but it's also important to note that natural mineral water and functional bottled water have the highest compound annual growth rate, even if they aren't going to make up as much of a sales volume. So definitely something that Coca-Cola can consider moving into the future. Right now, Coca-Cola holds about 24% of market share in bottled water sales. So if we're looking at the projected 2028 sales volume, if they stay at that market share, they'd be capturing around 1,600 million liters in sales volume. But if we increase that market share to 35% with these initiatives, we see an increase in 2,400 million liters and an increase in around 317 million in sales, which is a really significant amount. If we're looking at CL specifically using that same methodology by increasing market share to 25%, we're seeing about a 290 million increase in revenue. Okay, so yeah, pretty significant financial implications. We just wanted to really quickly go over a little bit more about what implementation looks like. So the first phase of kind of our three-pronged solution has already been documented a little bit in this presentation. It's really important for Coca-Cola to do pretty comprehensive research, regulation, analysis, and planning so that the rollout of these solutions is actually making an impact within the communities that they're serving. So this is compiling insights, gathering any necessary data that's needed to continue forward with that solution. And then the second part is actually implementing our three-pronged solution. So it's determining what CL production and or other water products or healthy drink alternatives looks like within the FEMSA bottling facility, and also developing the marketing and educational campaign. So what does that actually tangibly look like, as well as what distribution channels are we looking at to get that into the community and again have a legitimate impact. And then third phase is again hopefully by this point and by like 20, 30, 6 years, sustainable beverage ecosystem. Coca-Cola will have a more diversified product mix, so we're capturing those consumer trends that we've been mentioning throughout this presentation. And we're also giving back to the community. We see a huge community empowerment by Coca-Cola, one, being able to really focus in on these initiatives, decrease groundwater usage, and then be able to provide the infrastructure for the communities of giving groundwater distribution and really pulling these people out of where they currently are in terms of their health dynamic. Yeah. Thank you guys so much. Please let us know if you have any questions.
Okay, I'll be happy to start off. So I had a hard time following on how are you saying that the cause of diabetes in Mexico is the responsibility of Coca-Cola, in that, I mean, they're eating sugar in Nesquik, in other products. It's inherent.
Mm-hmm. So if we look at San Cristobal specifically, again, looking at the proximity of the FEMSA bottling facility and the cultural impact of Coca-Cola within that specific community, we just see a huge correlation of consumption of Coke due to, one, easier access than water and also cheaper costs. Coca-Cola tends to really decrease the cost, as well as this huge reliance on Coca-Cola for people's livelihood. So whether or not it's necessarily Coca-Cola's responsibility or they're super directly related, from a business perspective, we believe that it is within their best interest to consider the ethical implications that they have, because people can easily associate them with overconsumption of obesity within San Cristobal and really throughout Latin America. And if we're looking at consumer trend and trust in brand perception, which has a pretty direct impact on company revenue and the way that people are receiving a product, then if anything comes out where Coca-Cola is really negatively impacting these communities, or just generally showing that they don't care about the community, even if it isn't their direct responsibility, we just want to make sure that we're mitigating that risk looking forward.
Also, if you look at cities like San Cristobal specifically, as we mentioned earlier, there are people drinking on average about 2.2 liters of Coca-Cola every single day, which is way higher than any country like the US or Canada or anywhere in Western Europe, and it's just outrageous. So you can clearly see, as we showed in the graph earlier, a correlation between per units of Coca-Cola sold and an increase in health conditions related to sugar consumption. And of course, correlation isn't causation, but given how many liters of Coke are being consumed by people every single day, it's hard not to assume that Coca-Cola has a role to play in this grave issue.
Do you see the marketing differences in promoting regular Coca-Cola versus Coke Zero, or in Latin America, a lot of it it's Coke Light.
Right.
In the other products?
Well, from what we looked at recently, we kind of see a marketing push in areas such as Mexico City and more urbanized areas. But what we mentioned earlier was we feel that in a lot of rural areas of Mexico, a lot of marketing still focuses on the general Coca-Cola brand. And also, as Sophie mentioned earlier, we've also looked at marketing towards indigenous people in a way that's almost a little predatory, that really doesn't really incorporate many other brands of Coca-Cola. It's mainly just focused on drinks like Coke or Sprite or Fanta. So I feel like there is a push for those drinks where there is already maybe a college-educated population or a younger population, but not really, mostly absent in rural areas and more agriculture-based areas.
I have a couple concerns. It was kind of difficult to follow your slides. There was a lot of information on each slide. So just a couple questions. Is Coca-Cola the main? We're the board of Coca-Cola, right? So our job is to make money for our shareholders. So what marketing research do you have that says that people want a different product and want us to change our product mix? And secondly, who are the other employers? We provide a service to this community. We're an employer. Are we the largest employer? If we change our product mix, what does it do to our employees? So if you could kind of help me with, how changing our product mix is going to work to the benefit of the people when we don't have a lot of information that supports they want that.
All right, so actually, if we go back a few slides, we do touch upon it briefly about here. So what we have seen is...
What are you looking at?
If you look at the chart on the right. So
relationship with food?
Yeah, so this is a market analysis from last year specific to Mexico. And what we essentially realized was, there's a big young population in Mexico that is looking at healthier alternatives to what they're consuming. And if you tie that in with the chart below that, you'll also see that the overall bars show the global average, and they show the Mexican average, while the little dots show the global average. And you can see that people in Mexico, about 50% or about 40% of the consumers are actually willing to invest in alternative products. And as we mentioned in another slide, actually somewhere about here, It's about $68 trillion of wealth being
What slide?
Oh, so it's right below the trends graph, the figure with like the circle on it, where it says
Okay.
68. Yeah, so it's like we're passing on a huge market share to a younger generation, which we have seen is much more willing to invest into healthy alternatives, as I mentioned earlier. So there is definitely value in investing and diversifying the product mix, and you can see that it has been successful in the US in the recent years. So we kind of project a similar trend to take shape in Mexico as well over the next decade or so.
Yeah, just to kind of add on to that point, generally just across the board, not just in Mexico, but globally, we're seeing that stakeholders and consumers of Coca-Cola products are just beginning to hold them to a higher standard in terms of ethicality and health consciousness, because we're seeing a rising trend in that as well. So again, I feel like one of our biggest points is really just that we want Coca-Cola to consider what that actually looks like in terms of implementation and within specific communities, because we're looking at their main market beginning to hold them accountable for what that actually looks like within their production and within their operations.
I don't understand the ethical issue of producing a product that people want. And within Coca-Cola, there, there's Sure products, there's Coke Zero, as my colleague mentioned, versus water. Help me.
Okay, great question. I'm glad that you mentioned that point. So,
I mean, understand, why is it an ethical issue? Okay?
So we are seeing an increase in actual consumer want for alternative products. There are a bunch of just emerging competitors within the industry that are focused on more health conscious drinks. We focused on water specifically because of the regional problem, but that doesn't necessarily discount Coca-Cola doing more research and honing in that flavored water or functional water is going to be more successful, because we're seeing a rise of consumer want within those areas. So we focused on bottled water specifically, but that accounts for a bunch of different products. But we are seeing just across the board, consumers are looking to see those products, and they're looking to see it very specifically from a lot of competitors as well. So if Coca-Cola doesn't innovate and begin to adapt, then again, we're seeing stagnation, and from a long-term sustainable business growth perspective, they won't be able to keep up as well. Does that help a little bit?
Adding on to that a little bit, from an ethical dimension, I feel that Coca-Cola is, yes, it's right that we're producing a product that people want, but essentially what we mentioned earlier, we're limiting the choice that people have in choosing the product, because in this region, if we go back, Coca-Cola's price often tends to be lower than than the price of a bottled water, and they don't have access to drinking water in their homes on a day-to-day basis. We're not really leaving them a lot of choice in choosing between having a bottle of water and having a bottle of Coke. And also, if you look at it from kind of a macro perspective, Coca-Cola really cannot lose, because they still have the highest market share in bottled water. So even if we're pushing for bottled water, Coca-Cola still is producing water. So what we're only saying is that, hey, you're not really leaving people a lot of choice in choosing what's best for them, simple water instead of a sugary beverage. We're only saying maybe increase the amount of water we're giving them, so it balances out over the course of 6 years or so.
Well, you mentioned putting Coca-Cola on the name of the CL product. Are any of I don't see any of our competitors doing that, or am I misinformed? I mean, why should Coca-Cola put the name on the water? And I don't see any government incentives. Why is it the onus and to increase the cost of Coca-Cola, because the water appears, as you're saying, to be more expensive than the Coca-Cola product? I mean, are there government incentives to do that? I mean, in the United States, it wasn't Coca-Cola who was pushing water, it was health concerns. So, and water consumption has increased, but I don't see it as the dependence should be and the sole financial responsibility if we take, if we have a lower profit margin and it's a higher cost to develop water, and then it's only the responsibility of Coca-Cola to push water. What's the government of Mexico doing here? There should be some financial incentives for Coca-Cola.
Yeah. So
I understand the health issues, and it's a real health issue.
So I wanted to, you briefly mentioned that there was a higher cost for producing water. I know maybe it was just a little bit difficult to follow, but our argument is actually that it's a lower cost to produce water because we're decreasing cost of sweetener. So again, we're seeing revenue come in from just cost of savings from not having to spend on higher costs of goods sold, which we see in Coca-Cola products. So it's cheaper to produce water and then to push water. With the branding question specifically, it's more so that, again, looking at this very regionalized concern, these people really idolize Coke and the Coca-Cola brand. And so it was more so just like considering the ethical implications, again, trying to just take responsibility for this relationship that we're seeing between Coca-Cola and overconsumption of Coca-Cola products and San Cristobal. It was more so just a marketing strategy to encourage them to also buy water on top of Coca-Cola products. But please also consider that CL, water, and Coca-Cola it's all coming back to Coke. So the revenue is projected to increase regardless. So just diversifying product mix, taking a little bit away from Coca-Cola production and allowing a little bit of that to come to either healthier alternative drink productions or in this case CL production is still increasing the bottom line and increasing revenue for Coca-Cola.
So yeah, I'd love to just chime in a little bit. So first, I challenge your side. Honesty is the best policy. I think we're all honest brokers on this side of the table as representatives of Coca-Cola. So a lot of things come into play at Coca-Cola. First is brand protection, right? Coca-Cola is a valuable brand. It's got a lot of stickiness to it. Water is not going to have the same stickiness. Secondly, water is going to be a lot easier to knock off. We've seen it in a lot of other third world countries. You can knock off a lot of things pretty easily. So we are concerned about that as well. There's a lot of asks that you had on from your presentation. So if I could boil it down to one major ask, what would you want us to do differently?
I think the crux of it really comes down to addressing the very urgent, pertinent issue that we're facing right now, which is if you boil it down to a simple fundamental problem, it's Coke being cheaper than water in certain regions, which is really leading people to consuming a severe amount of sugary beverages in a single day. So if you have to boil it down to one ask, that's what that would be.
Raise our price on Coke.
Well, at least I think what we're trying to say is not raise the price of Coke, but reduce the price of bottled water, which is the CL water brand. So we're not really trying to adjust the price of Coca-Cola. We can maintain that price. All we're really saying is increasing the localized supply of CL in these regions so it can undercut the price of Coke. So at least people have the option, or a better option, to choose to buy these products. And what we also found, which we maybe did not mention, is that a lot of stores don't actually stock bottled water. They just stock huge supplies of sugary beverages. So a reduced cost of water, along with the marketing push that we're trying to advocate for, is also not only likely to push for a higher consumption of water, but it's also likely to encourage more vendors to actually stock bottled water, which is also an issue in certain regions of Mexico. So that's the crux of it.
So I'm not familiar with the water supply. Do people have water running every day?
No, that's the issue.
What's the window of water look like?
A few times a week, and it's not super clean because again, a lot of these communities are just very impoverished. They don't have any infrastructure to support their communities. So any waste or sewage is going into rivers. So groundwater is their main source of water. And again, we're seeing that Coke is taking huge amounts of groundwater for their production, which again, not necessarily a bad thing because we're still working with Coca-Cola to decrease what their water usage actually is. But then these people don't have any access to clean drinking water. And so they're lucky to have running water a few times a week. Whether that's sanitable or not is also in question. So they tend to have to buy either bottled water or there are trucks that come around that's really expensive to just like buy huge tanks of water. And so that's again part of the problem that Coca-Cola is just more widespread, more accessible, and oftentimes cheaper, which is why these communities have ended up as almost really becoming addicted to Coca-Cola, and it is their main source of like liquid consumption because they don't have water otherwise.
And I have a question. When you're doing research for this project, did you consider the risks of what your biggest threat is when you're implementing this plan? What do you think the biggest threat is when you're implementing this project? What is the biggest threat to this project?
I think in crux we would say since the push that we're trying to advocate for is so local, I feel like the biggest threat would really be on the marketing side, like a pushback or or like inefficiencies in marketing. Because again, we've seen that Coca-Cola has had a pretty stagnant majority share of all these markets that we've talked about. That has been unchanged through all the lawsuits we talked about and all the legal issues and financial issues we talked about. Coca-Cola is just such a giant in this area. I don't think we are likely to face pushback from competitors or competition, but I feel like the highest risk is likely to be on the marketing side, inefficiencies, and also maybe on the legal front, since Coca-Cola and local authorities often agree very strongly or do not agree with certain policies. Maybe some inefficiencies in negotiations there might take place. Those might be a complication as well.
And also in your presentation, when you're talking about doing audits for your water, when you're doing audits for your water, what did you consider, like how many times per month or per year, or is this going to be annually? Do you know?
So the audit that we mentioned is we're only talking about the circular water usage. That is one of Coca-Cola and FEMSA's sustainability strategy. So what we're essentially saying is they have done audits in the past on an annual basis to understand how water is being replenished to create a circular usage of water. Currently it's at 81% in Mexico, and they're aiming to reach 100% by 2030. So yes, there are going to be annual audits, and what we're suggesting is adding a dimension to these audits to ensure that water is replenished locally. So we don't want water to be drawn from Chiapas and be replenished to some other part of Mexico where they're not facing a water shortage, and these people are. So we're just asking to add another dimension to this audit to make sure the circularity is kind of localized as well.
I think another risk, and one that you've already mentioned, is that we are asking a lot from Coca-Cola in terms of mitigating this problem. So there's a lot to consider in what implementation actually looks like, and we've given just high-level base of what that could look like, but there is still much to explore about what that actually does look like. So when we're talking about marketing and communication and being able to really make an impact within a community, we do really need to consider what is going to be successful within the region, and then also probably marketing that out beyond the region, because we want to highlight the good that Coke is doing, because again, considering brand perception and brand value, really a big part of this is adding that back into Coca-Cola. We want this solution to, on top of being able to make an ethical impact and bring a community out of poverty and consider what the infrastructure and sustainable infrastructure and ability to be self-protecting is, we want Coca-Cola to really take charge of the situation that they're associated with, so that when people come and look at it, we're doing all of this and we're mitigating all of these problems, and we can communicate that very effectively.
So if your concern is groundwater and you would like to see us providing more bottled water, where's the water going to come from? Whatever source that we're using to make Coke, we have to assume that bottled water would come from the same source. So wouldn't we be using the same groundwater?
Yes, you're right. And so what we're saying is that we balance that out by 2030. So we're saying that we continue pushing scientific research to reduce the amount of water that's being used. But to your point, it's still coming from the same source. What we're trying to say is that right now, almost 100% of the local groundwater is being used by Coca-Cola, either to produce bottled water or to produce Coca-Cola or other products. What we're saying is that by 2030, A, we reduce the amount of water that's being used by Coca-Cola to produce what they're already producing, and B, as infrastructure for, so what we're saying right now is if we immediately stop using groundwater and just give it back to the people, it's not going to matter because there isn't enough infrastructure for them to access this water in the first place. So one of the things we said is that diverting funds that Coca-Cola has spent on educational programs in the region, if you spend that money in developing infrastructure by 2030 and reduce groundwater usage, the water that we're giving back can actually be accessed by people, and by that time we can actually reduce bottled water supplies to this region because it kind of won't be necessary at that point.
But if we're using 100% of the groundwater to make Coke, where's the water coming from that the trucks bring to people twice a week?
So I don't think the trucks have any association with Coke. They're probably
No, there's where's the water coming?
So the bottled water is just like any sort of production of bottled water. So it's not coming specifically from the PHMSA facility. PHMSA focuses on producing their products with that groundwater, and then any other water that's coming into the region is coming from an external party. So they're bringing that water from a different geographical location, which is probably also the reason why it's one, so inaccessible, and two, so expensive. So we really wanted to focus on having the PHMSA bottling facility because of its close proximity, and then creating a new product for Coke that's addressing that lack of water access and providing that for the community.
More questions?
No, I was just curious, what is the revenue for PHMSA from the region we're talking about?
Because PHMSA is a very large
Right.
company. I think most of the revenues come from the beers.
Right. And
So this is the total revenue of PHMSA from the 2023 financial.
but I'm just interested, you have it for that particular region, I mean, it's obviously a small state.
Yeah, unfortunately,
like-
we really couldn't find too much specific data to the region just because it is so specific, and Coca-Cola only releases so much information about financials and what their production looks like. So this is what we were working with to kind of get an approximation and an estimated impact.
Do you know what the population is in that particular region we're talking about?
Actually, don't do.
At some
And you
point.
can reverse engineer the revenue,
I think it's in the hundreds of thousands, but I do not
couple
have.
hundred, 250,000, 300,000 people.
Yeah, I do not have a specific number on me at the moment. Yeah, something along those lines. Yeah.
Okay. So it's not a large amount of people.
No, it's not a
Okay.
mega city by any measure. A major city by any chance. Yeah.
I got another question. I'm just curious. To make Coca-Cola requires a lot of additives to the water, correct?
Yes.
How is it that we're selling it cheaper than just regular water? We were told that the water comes from the same place, right?
Mm-hmm.
That what we use in Coke and what we put in our bottles.
It's all groundwater?
That's what we were just told.
So
We're assuming that the bottling facility, this 300,000 gallons that they're using, is being used for all production within the Coca-Cola PHMSA bottling facility.
So why does it cost more to sell just regular water that we don't have to treat as much as to make Coke?
So Coca-Cola is not necessarily selling water in this region specifically. They're selling Coca-Cola products, and they're working with local vendors to push Coca-Cola products and SSBs. So we don't know what the cost of Coke would look like from at least past historical records in the region, because they aren't selling it, they're selling Coca-Cola. But the comparison was just to water that was being provided by a different facility or a different company. And again, because Coca-Cola is so close and they work very closely with local vendors, they have a huge impact within the community. They make it really accessible and it is cheap. And there's we would probably additionally need to do an audit on this. I'm not entirely sure how valid the research is, but Coca-Cola has also there have been different reports saying that they specifically decrease the cost of Coca-Cola in more remote and agricultural communities, which again doesn't look super great from a brand perception idea because it looks like Coca-Cola is intentionally trying to sell more even if it's at a cheaper cost, and we're really reliant on overconsumption from these communities.
But we obviously want to make a profit for every bottle we sell, right?
Mm-hmm. But again, we're not suggesting that we decrease the cost of Coke. We're suggesting that they begin to sell bottled water, even if it's at the same price, just so these people have the option of choice. So whether they're buying bottled water or Coca-Cola, we're still getting revenue back from that, but we just wanted to consider the ethical standpoint of that and begin to push just more of a health focus with their product. So they're still gaining revenue from selling those products within the region. We're just considering adding additional products.
I thought we own the brand CL.
Yes, we do.
Okay. But we sell it at a higher price than Coke.
We don't sell it in the region. It's again just a huge focus on Coca-Cola. So in terms of again being able to consider the social impact and then lifting these communities up and considering what that relationship looks like, we want them to push also Coca-Cola and CL, which is one of their products.
We make CL, but we don't sell it there. Can people buy it there?
It's not super accessible. I'm sure there are some products that are being sold, but Coca-Cola within San Cristobal focuses very heavily on just Coca-Cola products. So local vendors in any shops or local markets are selling Coca-Cola products, and that's what that relationship looks like mainly.
I don't think it's that we don't sell that at all, but as I mentioned earlier, just vendors do not stock bottled water as much because it's just not in demand, because people are just consuming sugary beverages all the time. So we can sell it there, and as I mentioned earlier, Mexico consumes the most bottled water more than any other country in the world, and CL has been the market leader in the country as a whole. It's just that in this specific place, people just do not demand water as much because they're just consuming it.
They don't know anything else, yeah. And then again, sorry, I feel like that maybe the confusion is that we own CL, it is a product and it's being sold throughout Latin America, but not specifically being pushed in Mexico. So we're promoting that they begin to push either CL bottled water or other flavored bottled water brands under the CL product to begin to focus a little bit more and meet that consumer expectation for health consciousness.
And also, is this plan for one certain city, or is it for how many? Is this for one city in Mexico, or for several cities, or?
So what we're proposing here is being only focused on San Cristobal, which is one city in Chiapas in Mexico. Yeah.
So, do you have your personal experience of that city, or why did you select this city?
Well, we were essentially, I don't have personal experience, but my partner is actually from Mexico, and I heard about it.
Mm-hmm.
So that is why we chose to kind of hone in on it, kind of the indirect personal connection, I suppose.
Okay.
Have any of you been to San Cristobal?
No.
Also, going back, my partner is also from Mexico, and his father actually, he's a contractor, so he actually drank a lot of Coke products, just because during lunch breaks and stuff like that, and while he was working, and he actually got a stomach ulcer as well as diabetes from it. So both of us thought it would be a perfect idea, just because Mexico is having these issues of diabetes and obesity, and just other health-related issues like stomach ulcers from it being acidic.
And San Cristobal is, if you want to consider it a little bit like a case study, because it's such a widespread problem within the community. But we also see a lot of data, and throughout our research is a really widespread problem throughout all of Mexico. And again, we see huge production of just Coke across Mexico and with Coca-Cola FEMSA. So with this solution and working specifically with San Cristobal, there are specific parts of the solution, like considering what groundwater usage within that bottling facility and what that region looks like. But a lot of it can also be applicable to what the relationship of just Coca-Cola and Mexico and Latin America looks like, because it's a widespread problem throughout.
Are there any more questions, well, as the board of directors?
How much time do we have?
We have until 9:15, so I'd like to give them some feedback on just the presentation in general, and I know this is going to be one of your pet peeves already, and I agree with it. I had a hard time. You give us like 3 charts, and so now we're falling out of board of directors and just giving you feedback on presentation. Of which I spent so much time trying to figure out which one you were talking about. I prefer you go, if you look at the middle chart or the middle column, because the one that you had 78% and 34%, I was going, where are those numbers? And then I finally figured out it was the middle chart, but it was hard to follow because you presented so much information in one slide. Just guide your reader to know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, great feedback. There was a lot to get through, so I think I was just focusing on that, and then I didn't give you as much guidance as you needed.
Some of you just remember to speak slowly and enunciate. Sometimes because you're thinking, I only have 25 minutes, you're rushing through. So the other thing is, if there was a sales and risk chart that was so small, I mean, if that's an important part of your presentation, make it a separate slide, or maybe skip that and summarize it as a bullet point, because otherwise and you guys have to decide how important. That wasn't the most important in my opinion. Other comments?
Well, I'm not going to, what you said is exactly right. I mean, if you do a corporate presentation, you have one picture on there that would say, here's how much you're making, here's how much we can make. That's it, pretty simple, and then speak to it, as opposed to, I mean, you're doing this, I don't know, for our benefit or your benefit, but again, less information is probably better. I would have probably taken it at the other angle is, and I was driving at the revenue. I mean, at the end of the day, 300,000 people in Mexico is not going to move the needle for these Coca-Cola, right? I mean, it's just they got their brand. So I would have maybe said, board of directors, this thing is a real thorn in your side, because I did Google it, and it's a real pain in the ass for these guys, because you Google it, and what comes up? This little place in Mexico. The Coca-Cola is driving obesity. These are really bad actors. And I don't think Coca-Cola wants to be a bad actor, but maybe taking a little bit of approach like that and say, hey, listen, this is a sore spot for you guys. We got to find a solution to this. It's getting bad press globally for just this little thing, right? So maybe I would have taken that approach, or at least blended it in somewhere.
Or I would have, I know this is what you were trying to do, but you know how they say when you're writing a paragraph or a story, the first sentence should just tell you what the point is, and then you fill in it and you prove your statement. Your thing was, we need to increase water, Coke is pushing too much Coke, obesity is a problem. And I'm going to speak to that issue though in a minute. I happen to know intimately this area. I financed FEMSA. I lived in Mexico. My grandparents were born in Mexico, and it's true. But this is a problem not only in Mexico, but in Latin America. I see this. Access to water is a problem that I saw in Cambodia, in Vietnam, in the poor areas. Chiapas, I'm very familiar with Chiapas. This is where the oil is in Mexico. This is the hottest damn place in Mexico. It is also the poorest state in all of Mexico. So in San Cristobal, you're going to go through areas these people do not have running water. I do think it needs education on to replace sugary drinks with water, and I think that needs to be done. But I would have worked maybe some made up government incentives for Coca-Cola to be a good citizen. It should be just Coca-Cola on by itself. And as I said, FEMSA makes most of its money from beer, which was, I was happy to do that plant tour, by the way, in my younger years. Just as a point of reference, because my mother and my grandmother were insulin dependent, just because you're obese, because by the BMI, I'm obese, doesn't mean you're gonna have diabetes. But I don't drink Coke, okay? Once in a while, as a treat, I have a Diet Coke, maybe once every 2 months or something. So it's something, and I asked the doctors, my numbers are perfect, but I'm obese by the BMI. They said, the hell with the BMI. Don't worry about it, you look at your numbers. And I'm telling you this because not everybody is obese and understands obesity. You're all thin. You probably won't ever have diabetes. It's something I do have to watch healthfully, but just because somebody's obese doesn't mean they're going to be diabetic. Just FYI. Okay.
I want to be positive here. Okay. I've been in the corporate world most of my life. I was an investment banker, and what I've learned is if you're going to make a presentation, this would be great if you were sending it out to people so they could read it themselves. Here's what you want to do with your presentation. First of all, you want to tell people what you want them to do. From there, you go through the benefits of why that's important. And then your last slide should be, again, what you want them to do. With your slides, you got good information here. But you ought to you don't want people to get ahead of you. So when you have a slide that has that much information, the natural tendency is for people to start reading the slide and not listen to what you say. So you want to have less information on the slide and on each slide. And with that particular chart, you probably could have done at least, on the first side, cost of sweeteners, you could have broken that down into 4 different sections. Okay, and talk about each section, and that has more of an impact on the people because now they're focusing exactly on what you're talking about. And then you always want to bring it back to your last slide. Here's what we want you to do. That's where I was having a problem, trying to figure out why should Coca-Cola focus on water. I was U.S. ambassador to Zimbabwe. I went all through Africa, and I saw people waiting at long lines, filling up jugs of water. That is a common problem, but there are solutions to it. You can actually, believe it or not, extract water out of the atmosphere. And I think it's called source water. You might want to look that up. Maybe what you want is for Coke to invest in source water, and they can begin to make potable water for people. Okay, that's all I did.
Thank you.
I really liked the colors and of the slides, and I really like the way you use your charts and the data that you have, and it's very well researched. I like the way the colors match the Coca-Cola brand, and but I do think there's too much information in each slide, and like these 2 sentences, I don't think I wasn't even able to read that, so I don't think you should just have that in your slide, but more bullet points and less. Maybe less calculated, but more direct numbers, so that once I see it, it takes me 1 second to understand what it means.
All right.
I don't even know if we need all that detail on the sweeteners. I would just say the average cost of all sweeteners used in the process, whether aspartame or sugar cane, it's a rising cost. Because this is one of the things you're trying to say. Hey, it's costing us, it's going to continue to go up. So this is why you should be pushing water.
You know, there is one other thing. Most companies focus on what they're supplying, either a good or a service that people want. If you want the company to change what they're doing, you have to be able to provide them with some market research about why it's important for them to begin to at least turn in that direction. Okay, and I missed that. Okay, you did reference the fact that there are younger people who have a tendency to eat healthier. But well, okay. When
Emphasis on younger people. No, I'm being healthy.
So, but more of that would have helped. And then what you want to do is move gradually into it. But, you know, if we're making, the average company profit over sales is, what, 6%?
I do want to compliment you guys. Everybody had very good eye contact. You didn't have to look at notes. You looked at us. So I thought your presentation skills were very good. And as we said, you gave us a lot of information, maybe a little bit too much, but I thought everybody did a good job presenting, quite eloquent.
Just remember, use your visual aids as cues for what you want to say. You don't have to spell out everything to everybody on the slide, okay? You know what you want to communicate, so just use it as a cue. Can we ask what school they're from? Or is that a...
No, I don't think we can. I think it's a not to. They're not supposed to know. We're not supposed to know which school because we don't want any biases. You're
We'll
right.
find out later.
We'll find out later.
Thank you guys so much.
Yeah,
nice job.
This is a lot of work to put these presentations together.
Yeah.
So we appreciate your participation. We like doing this. Steve and I were classmates. Anyway, you did, as I said, this takes a lot of work, and you know we're glad you.
We really appreciate your feedback.
Yes, yeah.
It helps a lot.
Yeah,
We're glad you came.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Enjoy
Even
the rest
though I
of
had
See you later.
up at 5 this morning. Oh, you did too. Okay.
See you later.
Yeah,
Nice meeting you.
Thank you so much. It was so nice.
pleasure.
Thank you so much
Thank
for all
you.
the feedback and everything.
All right.
Thank you so much. It was really
Good
nice
work.
hearing
Lots
that.
of
Oh,
lots of
yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for all the feedback.
Like your ink.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. Good luck.
My mom, thank
Nice
you.
work. Lots
You
of
go
good.
to what?